Hi, everyone, and welcome to Kickboard's monthly webinar. My name is Jennifer Medberry. I'm the founder and CEO of Kickboard, and I'm thrilled to moderate today's discussion and thrilled to have so many of you joining us. I'm joined today by Greg Mortimer, Chief Information Officer at Jefferson County Public School District in Colorado. Greg has 18 years of teaching experience in information technology. And 4 years of classroom teaching experience. He's been in his current role at Jeffco for about 4 years. And Greg recently participated in a panel at South by Southwest EDU, a recent conference on systems integration with one of Kickboard's partners, InBloom, who's partnering with us on this webinar as well. And we're pleased to offer an encore presentation of that conversation for everybody who wasn't able to make it to Austin. So welcome, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Jen, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a lot of fun, so thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we have an action-packed conversation queued up. Our monthly chats with industry experts last only 30 minutes in length. So to everybody in our audience listening, I want to go ahead and encourage you to, as you hear us talking, to submit questions using the GoToWebinar Q&A panel as soon as you have a question, and I'll refer back to those later on in our conversation during some time that we set aside for Q&A. But to give everyone the right context, before we jump in to what systems integration actually is, I think it's really important to talk about why it's needed. So for Greg, who's several years into this process, want to give you the opportunity to just set the stage. Before you went through this, what was it like in your district beforehand? How did your district track student data?
So Jen, you're being very kind here. We probably aren't as far down the road as what you might suspect, and so this slide that we're seeing right here is much more reflective of what we would call our current reality. And for the folks who are participating in this webinar, if any of you are classroom teachers or you have been classroom teachers, this is something that might be very familiar to you. This is what we call data walls, and so teachers and instructional coaches who are involved in our problem-solving teams, this is actually still what it looks like today at Jeffco, where we're just manually using data from multiple different systems, sticky notes, and doing our best to kind of cobble that data together to be able to allow a significant amount of data to appropriitly inform instruction. And so this is very much where we're at right now, although we have started work to change that reality. But thank you for implying that we're farther down the road than we are, Jen.
Well, I think you are farther down the road than many schools and districts out there, simply because you're asking the questions and you're recognizing that the systems you have in place might not be as optimal as they could be, right? So let's keep talking about that. So explain the tracking systems that you're using, and kind of what the perspective you're hearing from all of the educators in Jeffco sounds like.
Exactly. So the slide that we've got up here now, this is one of certainly one of our best and brightest teachers that we have here at Jeffco Public Schools, and he's getting right at the core of what teachers, I would say, all over the country are feeling right now. And so I don't want to be presumptuous and say I know exactly what it feels like to be a teacher. I left the classroom a number of years ago, but as probably almost everybody on this call knows, as we move, most of the states, as we move toward a Common Core, as we move toward educator effectiveness movements and so forth, data has become more important than ever in terms of teachers being able to use that to inform instruction. And so I've been at Jeffco for not quite 4 years, and as long as I've been here, we have been, and even before I arrived here, we've been hearing loud and clear, we as in folks in our IT department, folks in central support for the district, that teachers, there's all these different data systems that teachers need to go to be able to grab the data that they need to be able to inform instruction. And it's a hard and time-consuming. It's a laborious process. And so on any given day, you know, a good portion of our teachers may log into as many as 8 systems or even more to be able to get access to the data that they need to inform instruction. And so that's kind of the challenge that we are facing here at Jeffco, and I know that that's a challenge that is felt by, that's a pain point that's felt by teachers all over the country.
And tell us a little bit more about that. So you say teachers are logging into different systems, and we also just saw a picture of, you know, a wall chart or a data wall of, you know, Post-its, arguably the most low-tech source of data that a teacher refers to, but certainly not any less important. What are the kinds of data and the kinds of systems that teachers are finding really valuable across your district?
You know, and so especially over the course of a 30-minute call here, we probably don't have time to get into too much depth, but what I think might be helpful for this particular point is to maybe use one case in point. And so this actually is an example from a neighboring district. I just happen to know this because of my kids, you know, going to school there and talking with the principal, and he mentioned that this is a challenge that certainly is faced by school districts everywhere and teachers everywhere. So like, for instance, maybe on a Thursday or a Friday, a teacher might give some sort of formative assessment, and then over the weekend begins kind of the grunt work of pulling all of that data from whatever assessment system that you might have, pulling that data, grouping that data together, looking to see where students are at with each question, you know, each measurement that would be seen on that formative assessment, and then being able to take that data and do something with it. So really the challenging part, or one of the key pieces that we want to do away with by integrating systems, would be able to say, okay, here's all that data. Instead of a teacher spending maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours pulling that data, aggregating that data, and analyzing that data before they even get to the point of putting in place some sort of intervention. Instead, we want to have systems that at the minimum could grab that assessment data, aggregate it, disaggregate it, whatever might need to be done there, and serve that up in a way that's meaningful for teachers. So maybe that hour and a half to 2 hours of pulling that data and making sense of it, that's the part that we want to do away with. That's part of what we get at when we say, if we're integrating systems, we can do away with that heavy labor that teachers have to wrestle with these days.
I think that's so important. And you cited an example from a neighboring district. I'm wondering if, you know, in Jeffco's recent past, are there examples of integrations that you've begun to do within your own district, and can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So what we've got involved with here at Jeffco is I'll talk briefly about this point. So there are a number of different districts who came together, about 5 districts in a phase 1 process, who came together as part of what was originally called the Shared Learning Collaborative. And so, as folks on this call may realize, you know, a couple years ago, the Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and then also the Council of Chief State School Officers recognized this need that within K-12 we have just growing amounts of data, and it's difficult to make sense of that. So couldn't we put in place some technology that would ease some of this data gathering and this data sense making? And so what the folks at Gates and Carnegie did was put up a sizable amount of money, about, you know, close to $100 million, to say, can we create an infrastructure that would allow that would provide a path for districts to be able to more easily integrate together tons of what we call back-end systems, and be able to pull that data from systems and make it available to teachers much more easily than is the case right now. And so at Jeffco, again, we started work on this pilot about 1.5 years ago, and you know, we're moving forward with that. We realize that there is tremendous potential for us in the central offices here at Jeffco to be able to provide technology systems that will make it easier for teachers to get at that data. So, and especially when we're talking about, I'm sorry, yeah?
Go ahead.
Well, I said especially when we're talking about this high-level stuff, that can start to sound like mumbo jumbo. Would you like me to drill down on that a little bit, Jen? Or?
So perfect segue. So let's actually drill down on that. And I think it's helpful for our audience, you know, some of which may be, you know, IT folks, some of which may be classroom teachers, some of which may be somewhere, you know, along the spectrum in the middle. Let's break down this idea of systems integration a bit more. To somebody completely new, Greg, how would you describe this concept and this process?
Okay, and so here's something that I would imagine that most folks, whether you happen to be a K-12 IT person or if you happen to be an instructor, a teacher, that you would be able to connect with. Jeffco is very similar to most other districts in that we'll have a student information system that is one database that contains a good portion of information about our students, student contact information, background information, scheduling, grades, etc. But at Jeffco, we've identified at least what we call 14 other downstream systems or 14 other databases within the district that need to pull data from our student information system to be able to make sense of it there. Like, for instance, if we have an IEP system, our IEP system would pull data from our student information system to populate some of that information about both teachers and students. But that's just one kind of integration between our student information system and our IEP system. Again, there's many other integrations that we are looking to do as well. The idea that we need that data to flow easily between those multiple systems. And so at Jeffco, that's one of the challenges that we are looking at. We have had teachers, kind of raising up to us the concern over a number of years, isn't there just one place that we can go, kind of a one-stop shop, so that we don't have to log into all these different systems? All that data can just appear to us kind of on a dashboard in one place to save us from jumping into all these systems, pulling data, and doing that data manipulation manually. So that's what we're trying to tackle at Jeffco.
So I think that's fascinating, and there's a point that I want to clarify with you. So you talk about integrating these different systems. That your SIS has scheduling and background info and attendance. Your IEP system might have different data, but certainly there's overlap in the student roster information. But from what you're saying, it sounds like we already have digitized a lot of information about students, and all of that information is being stored securely in, it sounds like, 14 or more different systems. And so integration isn't the beginning of digitizing all this information. We've already gone there, and now the point is we want to make that information flow seamlessly and securely from one system to the other to put the right information in front of a teacher or potentially another stakeholder, as I understand it, at the right time. Is that a fair way to summarize, or would you add to that?
I think that's a very fair way to summarize that, and also I think you've touched on one of the concerns that's being raised and one of the questions that's being raised by various really K-12 stakeholders around the country. And so when you hear this idea that we want to integrate together this data, and that you have large foundations that have stood up, have made available this infrastructure across the country to be able to help districts with integrating that data and maybe storing that data in one place, that very much gets, for some folks, that raises some eyebrows to say, well, my goodness, is that really appropriate? Is that data going to be secure? Do we know for sure that do we know for sure it's not going to be shared with folks who should not have access to it? All that type of thing. Those absolutely are the right types of questions that we need to be asking. And I will say, touching on your point, Jen, that yes, this type of data that we're talking about, we already have mountains of digital data, and what we're looking to do with these InBloom technology services is store that data and be able to integrate that data in a way that makes it much easier for teachers to personalize the learning experience. But again, in terms of making sure that that data is stored in a secure fashion, to make sure that it's stored in a FERPA compliant fashion, that's what we've been doing for years, and that's absolutely what we plan to, that's absolutely what we will continue to do once we start using those InBloom technology services. What those InBloom technology services provide for us, though, is a way to get rid of one of the most expensive parts of providing data systems in support of teachers who are personalizing the learning experience. It allows us to dramatically reduce the cost of integrating these myriad systems that we have in place in most districts.
So I want to dive into that a little bit deeper. I'm wondering, you just mentioned how expensive that integration can be in a non-InBloom, non-industry standard world. Are there examples that you've already come across at Jeffco that highlight how expensive that manual integration process can be?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a year ago, last summer, in in preparation for the 2012-13 school year, we implemented a new learning management system here at Jeffco. And so to give you some sort of scope about how large of a task that can be, at Jeffco, we're larger than most districts. Certainly some are a lot larger than us, but we have approximately 85,000 students and approximately 12,000 staff members. And so if we were going to look at just a basic, what we would call low-level integration, where for that work, if we were going to just automate the process of, with our HR system, pulling the staff information from there and then automatically creating the logins for this new learning management system, and then doing something similar for our student information system, pulling about 85,000 students, the information for about 85,000 students, and automatically creating those logins. I mean, that's something that we have to automate. We simply don't have the staff to sit there and manually create those logins. Well, that process by itself was an incredibly complex task to complete. And so for this project, we had tracked all of our internal IT labor over the 4-month implementation project, or the 4-month implementation timeline. And it cost us $185,000 in internal IT labor to do this implementation. 75% of those costs were directly due to that low-level systems integration. So if that learning management system a year ago had been InBloom compliant, and we had already started putting data into InBloom technology services, which we haven't yet, we could have accomplished that same task, probably in under half an hour. So we were looking at the potential savings of around $140,000 just for that integration.
So that's a pretty eye-opening example right there. And I am sure that if that's one of the 14 downstream systems you're working with, certainly begins to explain the rationale behind working towards a vision where there are standard frameworks for integrating these different systems. I want to go to something you said a few moments ago, and that was, the whole purpose of systems integration, at a district level. Within the education space, is to personalize instruction. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, especially, in these days, it can be really easy to just throw around that term, and we hear a lot of folks talking about personalizing education, and recognize that can mean different things to different people. So curious what that means within Jeffco, and what it means to not only the teachers that you work with, but also what it means to students and their families, if they've been involved in this systems integration process as well.
Right. So that's a great question. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that at Jeffco, I have the good fortune of working with, just some of what I believe are some of the very best and brightest instructional experts and leaders in the country. I'm very proud of my district. I think they're doing some good stuff. So I'm a technology guy. I don't want to pretend that I can articulate this as well as some of our, I don't want to, as our instructional experts. But when we look at personalizing this learning experience, I always kind of go back to the analogy that I think most people know, whether you're an instructional expert or not, whether you're in K-12 or not, that the learning model that we've had over the past 100 years, this assembly line learning, where the implication is that we all sit in the same classroom at the same time and learn in the same way, at the same pace, et cetera. I mean, that's the model that most of us grew up in. That doesn't work. So what we're moving toward at Jeffco, and we know that this is similar to what other districts are doing around the country, is to say, okay, how do we personalize that learning experience? So if we go back to the example of earlier, a teacher is given an assessment, and then you have that data. Here's what our vision is, what it could look like at Jeffco. And we're working on something called an innovative instructional system to put this in place. We're at the very early stages. So here's something what that could look like. If we take that same example, a teacher gives an assessment, and then automatically that data is pumped into into this IIS, this innovative instructional system, and it will tabulate the results of that just instantly, and then it will suggest groupings to teachers to say, okay, these groups of students seem to be at this particular place in their learning journey. These students tend to be at this place, et cetera, et cetera. Now we need to kind of personalize or differentiate instruction to say, okay, for students in Group A, what we're saying is you need a particular kind of learning strategy. So with this IIS, we want that to be able to just automatically be able to do some instructional analytics and suggest some strategies that would be in alignment with the Common Core to say, for these students at this place, have you considered these particular interventions? By the way, do you need some just-in-time professional development for that? Here's some other professional development that's going to be automatically offered up for that particular place. We're several years down the road from being able to get there, but that's what our vision is for how to use data to help personalize the learning experience.
That's terrific, and certainly a good vision that helps our listeners who are just starting out on their own journeys think of that ending point. And specifically to our audience, I'm seeing a number of really thoughtful questions come in, and just want to encourage you to keep submitting them on the GoToMeeting panel. And I will certainly Greg and I will do our best to ask and answer as many as we possibly can in the time remaining. But before we flip over to just an open Q&A, I wanted to just allow you to talk further, Greg, about the impact of system integration on the ability, what's the impact of all of this on teachers' ability to innovate in the classroom?
Right, and so you've showed this picture of like really some plumbing, and this graphic is great. It shows the parents, the administrators, the students, and teachers, all the key stakeholders, right? So if I can touch briefly back on that InBloom technology again, that InBloom technology is nothing more than just technology plumbing. What that provides for districts who take advantage of that is the opportunity to tie together these many disparate, different data systems so that data can be served up in ways that would be meaningful for whoever it is who happens to be tapping into that. So we've been talking primarily about the role of the teacher, but certainly the teacher would want to be able to have data in regard to better informing instruction. As we move farther down this data path, the parents also, part of our vision would be for parents to be able to see much more closely just where their students are at any given day. Students as well, we have a vision for them to be able to see their learning personalized, where they can log into some sort of portal and understand where they're at in their learning journey. And then certainly as administrators, for on the instructional side, can see that data and say, based on what we're seeing schools do here, how can we work with schools to better inform their instruction on a school level? So obviously we could talk about this in more depth, but for the sake of time, I think we'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fantastic. And what's been some of the initial feedback from teachers as you lay out this vision?
Right, and so first off, we've started work on this, and I say we, it's IT and in working closely with the instructional leadership of the district. We started work on this, as I mentioned earlier, in response to kind of those pain points that teachers have experienced. And so we put together like a proof of concept, stood up some screenshots to say, if we could put together a dashboard like this, and you could do your groupings like this, and you could grab your data like this, via a number of different screenshots and so forth. The most common reaction that we give, and we've shown this to a few hundred teachers and principals, is, this looks great. Can I have this in my classroom tomorrow? So that's what we're seeing.
And your answer is, I wish, right?
The answer is no, but we're working on this as hard as we can. So. And
as fast as we can, indeed. Well, that's probably a good segue into some Q&A, and I've got a number of questions from the audience, and encourage you to keep them coming. So you just talked about, the couple hundred teachers that have, weighed in on with their feedback, and so this is a great question to start with, for our listeners who are thinking about, going down this path. How do you ensure that teacher voice is heard when you go through this process?
Yeah, that's a great point. So what we do at Jeffco is that is one of the single most important, most critical things that we do, is we don't start any instructional process without making sure that teacher voice is heard. So for instance, we recently, just 2 weeks ago, went live with a new custom-built curriculum system. What we had done at Jeffco, we're large enough, we have economies of scale that allow us to pull out teachers maybe for a year or two at a time, teachers on special assignment, we call them. And we took two of our very best curriculum specialists, and we worked closely with the technology team to say, okay, what would a collaborative curriculum system look like that's tied to the Common Core and that treats curriculum like data rather than a pile of spreadsheets, something that we could use to to make life easier for teachers as they're doing lesson planning, all this around the Common Core. 2 years later, we stood up that curriculum system, and all along the way, we pulled teachers out of classrooms now and then to speak into what that looked like. We rolled that out 2 weeks ago, and so far the response has been just overwhelmingly positive. But that's because, like on that rollout or for that system, like everything we do, our goal is to build systems by teachers for teachers, and so that's really what we try to adhere to here at Jeffco for that teacher voice.
Mm-hmm. Are there, for the benefit of the audience, are there any roadblocks or mistakes that you made along the way that would serve as good lessons learned for folks that are just starting down this path?
Yeah, certainly. I would say one mistake, not in this, I'm happy to share about that success that we have. In the past, we've had mistakes before where we have tried to rush things out too quickly. And so we've had, I think that over the years we've learned from the mistakes of where we've rushed out too quickly. We didn't get enough teacher voice in making sure that there was really demand for some sort of technology system that we're putting in place, and then maybe not having provided enough resources for adequate professional development around that. I think all of us know if you put technology, whatever it is, in a classroom and you don't provide the appropriate professional development, it's a wasted investment. And we certainly have a landscape here at Jeffco, not a ton, but it's littered a little bit with some of those failed initiatives where we didn't sufficiently provide teacher voice. So allow for teacher voice.
I think, certainly we'd all agree about the importance of providing really high quality professional development, not just training on a tool, but also how you embed that tool in the day-to-day, in your day-to-day workflow as an educator. But something else that you mentioned that I just want to highlight for the audience is, which is, so often not said enough, is on the front end, ensuring that there's demand for a tool like this, which will really drive adoption. Is certainly a lesson that I think our audience can take away. So moving down this rapidly growing list of questions, and knowing that we have about 2 minutes remaining, I think we probably have time for one last question, and that is, how do you ensure privacy and security across data systems that are integrated and address some of those concerns that are out there?
Right. So I will say that at Jeffco, every system that we implement, we make sure that if we sign an agreement with the vendor that it's a FERPA compliant agreement that specifies very clearly who has access to what. And then also with our internal technical staff, we do everything we can to put in place systems that will be sufficiently secure. One thing I will mention about InBloom that we're excited about that is we believe that this will allow us to better secure our data. We're one of the few districts in Colorado that actually has enough funding to have a full-time digital security expert. With InBloom, they have the resources to bring some of the very best and brightest security experts in the country, including people who've been absolute national leaders when it comes to the area of, say, cybercrime and so forth. And so what we're excited about with InBloom is they're able to implement technology systems that are far more secure in terms of student data and equally FERPA compliant than what we could do on our own. I feel like I've almost used our time, haven't I, Jen?
I think you have, and that's exactly what I was hoping you'd do. So as I said in the beginning, certainly, this 30 minutes goes by quicker than we ever anticipated at the beginning, and really appreciate all of the great questions from our audience. Certainly for those Kickboard specific questions that we didn't have a chance to answer, make sure that we have your contact information, and a member of the Kickboard team will follow up to get those questions answered. And want to thank Greg for sharing his wisdom with us today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and you will, for those in the audience, you'll actually check your email. You'll be receiving a quick one-page cheat sheet of resources and takeaways from today's conversation. We encourage you to use that and also share it with your colleagues, both within your district and outside. And stay tuned for next month's webinar. We look forward to having you again. So thanks, everyone, and take care.